Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Power of Insights podcast from Etihad Credit Bureau. My name's Hamad, and I'm the host of the podcast. Today, I'm delighted to have with me Ben Bolger from Squirrel, who's going to introduce that to you all shortly. And I'm excited to have Ben here with me today because we've been chatting for a little while already in some of the forums that we've met, particularly with regards to the National Financial Strategy for Financial Literacy and Inclusion being developed, some of our industry partnerships with entities like Zood and the Central Bank, and we're crossing paths more and more. So we've had some good collaborations. But what stood out to me, Ben, was your passion and enthusiasm for your topic around financial literacy, particularly with young people. And I thought, what better way to really help advocate that very important message than to invite you onto the show and hear it from you directly. So thanks for joining me. And I'd love you to just introduce yourself and what makes you so passionate about this topic.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, Hamid. Like you mentioned, I'm obviously one of the co-founders at Squirrel, which is a financial literacy EdTech platform supporting students around the country and sort of globally. But yeah, I mean, in terms of sort of my background, I've spent the last sort of decade working in the private wealth management space, sort of chartered wealth manager, certified financial planner, and had never really thought I'd be walking the halls of schools again and back in the school sort of ecosystem. But I was very fortunate enough to sort of meet my co-founder, who is in education, spent the last sort of 25 years in sort of working across schools, and basically he had sort of developed a very manual banking program within his classrooms, and essentially gave children the opportunity to practice a lot of the stuff that they would face out in the real world. And having spent the last sort of decade working with clients from all different backgrounds and journeys of life, what I came to the conclusion, and I'm very passionate about, is that what typically separates people who are good with personal finance and what typically separates people that maybe struggle with it a bit more is so much more to do with the habits and the behaviours that they've built. Okay, and knowledge isn't a premium anymore. You can go and get knowledge from anywhere and find out the information you need. Whether you then go and build the habits around that knowledge and put that into place for a consistent period of time, that's going to be down to you. And yeah, I mean, no different to living a healthy lifestyle. We can't just give children YouTube videos on why to eat a balanced diet and why to exercise regularly. We have to put them in an environment that means that the behaviours that we want them to build are like the ones they're doing consistently and are the norm, right? So essentially, Matt's sort of classroom economy, Matt had an idea of how we could bring that to life and help more students, help it become less labour intensive for schools. And we've just become obsessed about trying to find a way, because I mean, financial education isn't in the academic lives of students enough. I think there seems to be it feels like there's a lot of energy around the world now sort of saying, why are we not learning a bit more about finance or the personal finance? Like, there's a lot of stuff that maybe isn't as relevant to today's world that is still getting taught to children, and children still aren't really coming out with a deep understanding of maybe the dangers of short-term debt, like or the benefits of investing in compound interest and so on. I mean, these are just the fundamentals. And but I do think that there is a lot of energy and momentum, and I mean, half of the states in the US have mandated financial education upon graduation. Obviously, the reform or the sort of audit that's happening on the UK education system, and one of the biggest things that they found is that key stage 4 leavers and parents say that personal finance was one of the things that should have been in their academic journey, and we know as well here, I mean, it's important to the leadership here. So I think we're right at a really nice time when it comes to financial education and financial literacy, because I think the world is sort of waking up, right? So it feels like a great space to be in, and yeah, we're super passionate about what we do, and yeah, looking forward to sort of sharing more about how that comes later.
So I love that. I love the union as well of, as you say, your background in wealth management and understanding money matters and having that kind of proper industry insight and practice, combined with an educator, as you said, your co-founder Matt, so that makes perfect sense, because I think, as you mentioned, there's a lot of information on this topic, like many topics, like health and all these things. And I think we're all guilty of that, right? We know everything, or we can know everything. I'm certainly guilty of that, right? I know plenty about money matters or health matters, but how much of it am I really doing on a regular basis? So tell us then, okay, with that combination of your background and Matt's background and an interest in the topic, tell us about Squirrel. What did you actually do with that opportunity space that you saw then? And what does Squirrel mean even? I don't think I've asked you that personally as well. Tell us the story.
So essentially, like I said, we took Matt's very sort of organic classroom economy, where basically he walked into a school probably in one of the Northern Emirates probably 10 years ago, and was like a relatively new teacher, and was like, what can I do to get children on side, like as a new teacher, and there was a number of things that he wanted to address, sort of attendance, behaviour, engagement and stuff, but he knew that children enjoyed talking about entrepreneurship and money, but there was nowhere in the curriculum, or there was nothing that was coming up that he was going to have to teach that. So he was like, right, well, what I'll do is we'll create this sort of classroom economy style sort of setup. And they all had a sort of a weekly salary. They had wallets, and they had bills that they had to pay, like textbook rent, desk rent, and so on.
And this was all physical.
It's all physical, right? So it's basically one big game of Monopoly.
Right.
And look, he got, like, they were banking, they could buy business licenses and so on. Then what happened was, that he got to the end of the term, the children were super engaged. One of the things that he'd be one of the first to admit that he's not necessarily like a personal finance sort of nerd, or like he's very much an educator. But one of the things that he didn't realise was the program that he was running in schools was a catalyst for dialogue, right? So children were one, starting to talk a lot more about personal finance, but two, going home and having these conversations at home, right? Which we know doesn't happen, right? Like, there's enough academic evidence that says that people don't talk about money at home. So they were having these conversations at home, and then that conversation was coming back into the classroom, and Matt was just facilitating this discussion. But his aha moment came when he was like, he brought the top 3 sort of money earners up to the front of the class, because they had a bit of a class party. So children, teachers and parents, they went out and bought sort of cheap plastic toys and donuts, pizzas, where the children could then use their fake money to go and purchase these items. And he said, but he brought the top 3 money earners up to the front of the class and said, I'm going to give you the opportunity to bid for our classroom guitar. Now, I think Matt thought he was Jimi Hendrix in front of these year 6 children every now and again. But he said to me, when he's telling me this story 3 years ago, he was like, look, I promise you, like, every single one of them wanted that guitar. The idea of walking away with Mr. O'Brien's guitar at the end of the day was a big deal. Yeah. And he said, you've got about $14,000. It can't go for less than $10,000, but you can have an auction and bid for it, and you knock yourself out. Now, obviously, all the children were screaming at these kids to bid, and he said, what felt like a lifetime of back and forward. He said, not one of them could bring themselves to bid for it, right? And that obviously sort of blew his mind as a teacher, because he was like, well, there's no real prize. The idea of me giving away this guitar that I don't want to give away was the prize, right? So he pulled them aside and said, well, what was going through your mind? And they basically said, we had to do things that the other children didn't, whether that was save when others decided to spend, whether that was starting businesses, whether that was putting extra effort and getting rewarded by you as a teacher. And we just want to finish the program strong. So me and Matt sort of like went for a coffee. We got introduced and went for a coffee, and which was meant to be like 20 minutes, but we ended up sitting there for 4 hours discussing this. But like, the thing that was flashing my mind was that delaying of instant gratification, right? And the behavioural side of finance there. And I was like, you could be onto something here. Can we create an environment where children have to practice the things they're going to face out in the real world, not just build an EdTech product where there's some videos, answer some questions, and then whether you get the questions right or wrong, there's a leaderboard, right? Like, what we wanted to. So that's essentially what we did. We took Matt's manual banking program, made it into a digital context. We are now able to help a lot more children. We're able to make it less labour intensive for schools. And now, so we've got this virtual environment where children are sort of earning a virtual salary, they pay regular utility bills, they've got to move money between current accounts, saving accounts, emergency funds, they can give to charity, they take out insurances for things, they have to budget for things in the marketplace. But like you said, we want to then sort of take it forward to anything that they can face out in the real world. Obviously, we have elements where children are given information and in situational, they're asked in certain situations so we can understand the knowledge side of it, but that real focus on behaviours and habits. I think one of the things that always stood for me, I've come from a sports background, like when you watch the Michael Jordan documentary, Tim Grover, his coach, talks about Michael practiced so hard that when he was out on the court, he didn't have to think. His body had already taken, he'd hit the three before his mind had even thought about hitting the three, right? And that's essentially what I want for Squirrel, is that in short space of time, maybe 10 to 15 minutes twice a week, but compounded over a 38-week academic year and then multiple academic years, I want children to have practiced enough in our platform, failed, made mistakes, learn from those, but when they go out into the real world and they're faced with these real problems, intuitively, they already know what to do because they've done it so many times, right? And I know how this has played out, right? They're aware of all the biases, the emotional and cognitive biases that are likely to come up, right, in certain situations, so that they're prepared, and in a sense, their body's taking over because I know that I need to do this, and I've done it consistently for a long period of time in Squirrel. So that's essentially, that's essentially what we're doing.
So I think now I get the term as well a little bit. So again, being from the UK as you are, so it's that habit of squirreling.
Oh yes,
away,
so
right?
I did. Yeah, so
yeah.
We get that a lot.
When now hearing you say it, it makes a lot more sense. Yeah,
we get that a lot. Why squirrel? Why squirrel? And like you said, in the UK, my grandparents all the time would be like, you know, when you're in family situations and they try and slip you £5 and say, right, make sure you squirrel that away for later. So it's that connotation for squirrels. Obviously, they save in nuts, but I mean that's that sort of phrase that we have in the UK.
So you built the platform, right? That was the thing. I remember when we first met and you know, was hearing some of the story, and actually I initially thought that this was something that you were building momentum on, and obviously as we got to know each other, it transpired that no, actually, as you say, you've been on a 3-year journey with this, and you know, very much domestic here in the UAE, built the platform and, you know, rolling it out, etc. So maybe tell us a bit about that. Like, this is not a theory, you're actually doing this, right? No. And like, I'd love to hear and share a bit more about what you're actually doing in the market with it. Like,
yeah, I mean, we literally had a coffee and yeah, I think it was just it just felt so synergistic in terms of both our passions. And Matt had the education side, I obviously had the understanding of personal finance, and the thing we didn't have was obviously we're both non-tech founders, right? So we had to then go to work, find out who could then start to build our platform and so on. But yeah, we got an MVP ready. We then tried to get, like, could we get 5 good schools to pilot what we were doing, get their feedback, and then since then we've just grown and grown and grown, and I've basically just lived in schools for the last 2-3 years, where we're now sort of over 80 schools have been using our platform worldwide. And I mean, like I said, majority of those have been in the UAE because we're building here from the UAE, and we're very passionate I've said it a number of times, like I'd love the UAE to be like the financial literacy capital of the world for youth, right? I think there's a huge opportunity. I think it's an important enough sort of cause to drive and stuff. So we're very passionate building from the UAE and then making sure, because as we know, financial illiteracy is not just a UAE problem, right? It's a full global problem. The most developed economies in the world, populations are struggling because of the lack of understanding of money, and well-being is in adults is affected because of the lack of understanding in money. So we've created our platform, and schools are joining every day, and which is amazing to see. And and hopefully may that continue, and we try and just I'd love to help every single child on the planet, right? They need it.
So I think one of the things that really resonated with me and therefore what we do at the Bureau when we spoke was, as you said before, this idea of behaviours and habits, right? So a lot of people think it's about knowledge or just about access to money, and like some people have money, some people don't have money, but it's actually more about the habits, the behaviours and the mindset that you use with money and interact with it. So with us at the Credit Bureau, obviously, we're in the or we're certainly associated with the financial services industry, and we're very close to that industry. Obviously, we work very closely with the banks and the lenders and also other data sources and providers, particularly in the government ecosystem. So let's say in the simplistic view of what we're doing is about data and information, but actually that data and information is a reflection of behaviours and habits that people are conducting. And I know that's more in the adult population. Obviously, those are people who are active in the credit market. But for children, it's going to be the same thing, right? The way I see it is when you kind of come of age, if it were, get into that sort of 18, 20, post-education, into the working world, one of the first things, and we've all been through it at our age, is you very quickly start coming across the credit market, right? You may want to get your first car, you may need a credit card to make some purchases, or start getting some of the benefits of credit cards or lending products. You may need a personal loan to fund a business, or to fund your expenses, and all these different things. But often young people have challenges accessing credit. Now that is going to be down to lending criteria, etc. But actually the first hurdle they're going to face is, again, the knowledge and the behaviours that will affect their credit profile. So early mistakes, for example, can cost people long-term problems, like missing payments in those first few installments, or getting a particularly bad credit product, or using credit when you could have used a different mechanism. And so building that knowledge up from an early age, which is what you're doing, is definitely going to be something I think sets up the UAE's youth well, for the future. Is that by the time they enter, their working and earning and spending lives, they've not just got the knowledge, but they also know how behavior is going to affect that. So I think that's what really resonated for me, and I definitely think we've got a lot that we're going to collaborate on in terms of how do we build that into your your platform, and give people access to what credit behaviors will do. But maybe tell us a bit more about that side of behaviors, and the difference between what happens on your platform to encourage behaviors versus just disseminating information about how this all works.
I mean, look, I think as well, I mean, like, there's a real need for us. So like you've mentioned, we live in a world where, for the majority of us, we have to have a relationship with financial services. Majority of us will access credit to achieve milestones, whether it's buying a property or to fund things that we need to do, or I mean, sometimes out of necessity. But a lot of our relationship with money is formed at such a young age, right? I mean, the academic evidence out of Cambridge says that by 7, our relationship with money is already starting to form, right? So about what we see and what we hear. So that's why we find it so important that we need to often a lot of the financial education is out sort of at the sort of university school leaver age, right? And I think we can work our way back. I think it would be better, like, what we're trying to do is start at a much younger age. But yeah, I mean, the idea that like I said, we can't just pretend that you can go and live a life without getting credit, right? Like, I mean, it'd be stupid to say, all right, never borrow, because I mean, like, or take on debt, and all debt's bad, and is because that's not realistic, right? And that's hiding children away from what they're going to face out in the real world. So I mean, for us, it's building these environments. How, especially as we build into much older age groups, how realistic can we get this for the children? How can we put them in a position where they have to take out credit in the virtual world for certain things, right? But then potentially they've overestimated what's coming in, or they've left themselves short, and unfortunately they've missed payments, like you've said, and stuff. And then can they start to understand the virtual credit score that we're building in this, right? I mean, I think that's a point even in its own sense, right? It's like children understanding that, like you've said to me, as soon as you start taking out a mobile phone contract, right? Yeah. Well, it starts ticking, right? And I think that even that just awareness, and I think if we were able to build a platform where children are coming out and having practiced a number of these things and the behaviours that you as an organisation are overseeing, or building a representation of that individual, if they're aware of these things, they're going to be a lot more mindful. And then if we're able to then guide them and build the good habits around them, so that they're serving them, so that their credit scores are going to be good credit scores, and they're going to be, I mean, think about how far they're going to be ahead of our generations and the generations before that, right? Like, so that, I mean, like the whole point of Squirrel isn't, the whole point of Squirrel is really just, can we put these children in an environment, like in a simulated environment that replicates what the real world would look like. We don't send airline pilots up on day one in an aeroplane. Lewis Hamilton didn't learn to ride an F1 car in an F1 car. He was on a simulator, right? Like, so let's put them in a contained environment, but let's try and make it as real for these children as possible, so that transfer of knowledge, that transfer of habits and behaviours is a lot more seamless.
Yeah. And have you found then, now that you're actually rolling this out to schools and you're seeing kids and teachers, adopt it, like taking that, if I can call it that, gamified approach. So it's a virtual world, virtual activities. It kind of, it plays out over time as well, right? So there is, as you say, it's a simulation, isn't it? So was that the key to making the adoption and the way it resonates with young people and children? Is that the missing piece that's not been done before? Because it's always about knowledge and content, and actually making it, either call it gamified or simulated. That's the reason you took the route. And what kind of reaction have you seen from that?
Children want to learn this stuff because they can see it. They can see how when I go in, even if I did a workshop in traditional learning, children are engaged because they can see how this knowledge, how the learning, how that then reflects straight into the life beyond school, right? Like I said, there are stuff that children will be sat there in classrooms where they're like, I don't know when I'm ever going to do this, right? Like, whereas when it comes to personal finance, money, making decisions, they are very much aware that this is then going to play out. So now, if we can make that in a gamified, simulated environment, where that's even better, right? And children, I mean, they want to feel engaged. They want to feel like they want to learn by doing, right? As opposed to sitting and listening. So that's our biggest driver, and that's what we want to try and create. Now, the reaction's been great. I mean, obviously, it's still like, I mean, the children on our platform, they're paying accommodation rents and transport fees and stuff like that. They're not obviously doing that in real world yet because they're not earning and stuff like that. However, the feedback's been amazing. And one of the biggest things is that schools initially worry about is what the parents are going to say, right, when it comes to money, because for so long it's been a bit of a taboo subject. But the amount of times I get stopped by schools and they're like, do you know what, like, our parents are stopping us at the gates saying thank you for bringing financial literacy, and we think it's so important that the children are learning about financial literacy. The children are super engaged. They enjoy it. They love it because like I said, it's something that they feel is relevant, and for the teachers, hopefully we're building something that is fitting in seamlessly with them, right? I mean, our whole ethos is like, how do we financial literacy, unfortunately, still is a nice to have subject in most schools. So how do we build it so that we don't put extra pressure or extra workload on the staff, right? So that's so we're trying to make sure that we're able to try and satisfy all the sort of school stakeholders in, or the school sort of ecosystem. But yeah, I mean, the feedback's been really, really positive.
I think that's the other thing, isn't it? Is that how does this get onto the priority list for people, right? Whether it's individuals, whether it's schools, whether it's at a national level. So, at the Bureau, we're obviously working with a number of the key entities. The Central Bank, the World Bank has been involved. Zood as a new entity in Abu Dhabi, promoting the topic of financial well-being and literacy as well. A national strategy is being developed as we speak. In fact, by the time this episode goes out, it will have been launched. And I think there's definitely a building momentum across a number of key entities and the national leadership and industry, as well. Everybody seems to always talk about the importance and the necessity around financial literacy, financial inclusion, adoption, understanding, behaviours. But it feels like, for once, it's actually starting to happen, and there's actual initiatives, investments, partnerships, private businesses, startups. There's a lot more activity around this than there ever has been before, and particularly here in the UAE, it's converging because so many of these topics and initiatives can be fragmented, and they are still somewhat fragmented, and we have to acknowledge that. But there's also convergence, right? So we build on on that convergence and say, right, where is the overlap happening? Where can those partnerships be in place? And I think definitely, seeing that national strategy come into play, and then, people like yourselves at Squirrel, or entities like us as the credit bureau, collaborating to actually make it real in as many ways as we can. I think that's at the moment what feels as being different to what we've seen in the past, where it's rhetoric rather than action. And are you feeling that coming from the other way? And also, like, again, what's the reaction you're seeing from when you speak to the the teachers and the children, to say, what's the user experience of that actually mean?
Yeah, I completely agree. But I do also think that that's partly because there's a lot of evidence. Like, so it's very difficult to argue against, like, a child or an adult should be learning about money, because it affects it. Like, every single child that goes through our education system will have to have a relationship with money, right? So it's very difficult to argue that we should be giving them that education. The second thing is, we've already got decades of evidence that shows what the lack of that education creates, right? So we've got the mess that happens typically, that or can happen because of the lack of financial education. So it's nice now, and it's so encouraging to see that people are coming together and going, right, well, this has been going on for too long, right? And not just in, say, education, but all streams of life. How do we, because I mean, I'm seeing it more as well in the workplace. So I'm getting asked to speak a lot more in sort of workplace, in sort of, and financial well-being is becoming more of a, employers are taking that onus as well, and and we're starting to see lots of more different initiatives across lots of different sort of walks of life. But I think it's super encouraging. I think that people have sort of getting to the point, governments, education councils, corporates, sort of putting their hand up and saying, how can we help? Because everyone can relate to it, right? Everyone goes, oh, like, what would my life been like if I would have learnt this a lot younger? I mean, the amount of times I've walked in and teachers have said to me, oh, if only we had this when I was a kid, right? Like, so it's something that I think that we've seen go on for too long, and a problem that we've seen go on for too long. And I think that people now, and it's just, like I said, so encouraging to see so many different entities coming together. And I think that's what it's going to take as well. There's no one entity that can solve this problem on their own, right? And I think the more we can come together, I think the more the sort of corporations come together with innovative companies, to hopefully like ourselves, and government come on and help, and like everyone's talking to drive policy, to drive structure, and come together. I think that's what it's going to take. And I don't think it's a problem that can't be solved either. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's one of these things. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that because it is habits and behaviours, a lot of it, and this is why we're so strong on it, they take time to form. And but if we can start to get young children building better financial habits, right, and being better with money and more effective with money, what do you think that's going to happen to the sort of the generational cycle that comes up? Because all the habits all the good habits as parents, as a young parent, I'm constantly thinking about, like, how do I best serve my child in making them the best that they can be, and being kind, being caring, being thoughtful. Now, my habits around money will also transcend into the children. So if we are spending that time with the children and changing that generational cycle is going to change, right? And it's going to start to fix itself. As well as there's evidence that shows that by children learning money at school as well, that there's a reverse spillover effect, right? So children that learn money at school, there's academic evidence to say that that the parents then go on to show better financial habits and behaviours, because it becomes more of a topic within the household and so on. So I think I'm really encouraged to see there's lots of momentum. I'm encouraged that, especially in the UAE, it feels like lots of different partners are coming together and saying, right, we're okay. We'll put our hand up to help contribute and support this. And I'm also encouraged, having spent the last 2-3 years in this space, thinking this is not something that can't be fixed, right? And it's not going to be overnight, but I do think that we can make huge strides forward, because we're coming from zero, right? Like, to understand what I'm saying, we were coming from the majority of children never learning anything about personal finance at school. We're coming from a place where no one talks about personal finance at home, right? So it's that going from 0 to 1 could make a huge difference, and then we just keep building on the top of that and the momentum, and then eventually that will then, that, like I said, that generational change, I'm hoping will start to sort of fulfill itself.
Yeah. I mean, look, Ben, I'm definitely excited about, you know, joining you guys on this journey as well, and certainly I can see how the role of what we do in terms of not just, you know, understanding and using credit scores, credit reports and behavioral patterns, you know, using data and insights, you know, as a way to be able to give people better information. Those same kids who eventually become adults and spenders, earners and entrepreneurs, you know, understanding how that collective set of financial data also tells a story, right? And actually, how do they use that to either make an investment case or a savings case or a long-term plan, or to fix a problem that they maybe didn't know that they had. And so I definitely think, you know, we're going to have a lot of places that we can collaborate on for sure, including the messaging as well, right? And hopefully by having you on the show, that brings this topic to our audience and also to the people you're speaking to. Ben, to wrap it up, I mean, we could speak for hours, I'm sure, and I look forward to doing that offline as we usually do. Tell us just a bit more about what can we expect next then. So I think by the time anybody watches this episode, as we said, you know, you guys are working kind of hand in hand with a lot of the national initiatives. You're embedded into the education, you know, sector, and you're speaking to parents, kids and schools. What's coming up next? And by the time someone watches this episode in 3 months, 6 months, or a year from now, where is Squirrel going, and what are you guys really excited about?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's loads of work that, I mean, we feel like we're just the sort of tip of the iceberg. I mean, look, we're going to continue to develop our platform. We want to expand it across much wider sort of age groups and build all the way up from, I mean, build down from about 5 to 18 years old. We want a platform that spans across a whole academic lives journey. We're building out lots more sort of curriculum and teacher resources and support for teachers, the sort of CPD for teachers, coffee mornings for parents, and we're constantly sort of doing workshops for students, like student hackathons, and like, I mean, look, we are, whether it's going on national road shows and going all the way around the country doing stuff during Global Money Week, or any of the sort of initiatives that we're always looking to try and support in any way we can. And I think with Squirrel, we just want to keep pushing it to try and hit as many children as we can, like from the UAE and get the UAE, but then also globally, right? And from the UAE, push financial literacy to the children all over the world.
That's fantastic. I think what I really love when I hear you speak, Ben, as well, especially from that vision point of view, there's a lot of founders or a lot of new initiatives that will have very big visions, and we could do this and we could go to there. And what I really like, even in response to my question, is that I get a real sense that what you guys are really focused on is just doubling down on what you've set out to do, and, you know, actually just seeing it happen, you know, rather than, you know, grand visions that may play out. And you've got that sense that it will make a difference, as you say. It's starting from a low baseline, but actually just delivering, you know, what you've set out to do is actually what the impact needs to be, rather than all of the possible things that may come as an outcome, which I'm sure there will be. Yeah. But I love that energy, you know, that sometimes a lot of people that we speak to in industry can get wrapped up by big visions and the possibilities, and that's important, you know, to have ambition.
Yeah,
but sometimes keeping things simple and actually just delivering on that promise really well and consistently is what makes a difference. And I think, you know, we often get, you know, that same comment at the credit bureau, right? Because we act as a backstop and a kind of, you know, a consistency element within the industry. And, you know, around us, the fintech industry, the EdTech industry, the payments industry are known as the innovators, you know, like, and that's great. But at the same time, we play that role as a consistency, right? To build, you know, credit information, build behavioral data, you know, feed that back, make it accessible, add new data sources and partners that can enrich that insight so that people can actually build innovations on the back of it. So I'm a big believer in that sometimes just quality and consistency in what your core mandate or your core opportunity is also really powerful, and innovation and visions and opportunity plays a role. But it sounds like you guys are very much focused on getting that message and that behavioral influence into the schools and the kids. And that is where the value is going to come from.
Yeah, I think we're very passionate about what we do. I think we feel we've got a solution that will make a huge difference, and I think that we keep, like you said, double down on trying to push to as many children as possible, showing how we are changing children, the impact we're having, and changing behaviours and increasing knowledge. All the other stuff can come after that, like you've mentioned, and I think that if we can continue to do that and collaborate with different entities, like yourself, like the impact will be magnified organically. If you can't get it right at the beginning and you haven't got a product, if you haven't got a solution that's actually working and actually can serve the audience that you want to serve, none of that's going to work out anyway. So yeah, I mean, I think we're just so invested in our mission of supporting students. For me as a founder, it's an easy cause to get out of bed for every morning, right? I love what I do, and I know that when I go into schools, I see the energy and the love that students and schools have for our product and have for what we're doing. So yeah, we're not going anywhere anytime soon. We're, like I said, doubling down on what we're doing.
Fantastic. I mean, obviously wish you all the best of luck with all of those plans. Definitely looking forward to collaborating with you again. And yeah, I'm sure both yourself and your users, our viewers, we're going to see joint things together in our communications, in our projects, in our platforms. Thanks for joining me on this session. I hope our viewers enjoyed the story as much as I do, and we look forward to seeing you and hearing from you on an ongoing basis. Thanks a lot, Ben.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.